The
Right.
recording. It started. Yep, we're started. So you're ready to go.
All right. Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Swafield, and I'm one of ACS's certified trainers. And I'm happy to have all of you with me this afternoon. We're going to spend about an hour together talking about best practices with RAM with your member profiles. I want to be sure everyone is hearing me. So, if you will, if maybe a couple of you would type something in the chat box on your screen and let me know that you're being heard, that I'm being heard, and we're ready to go. Somebody just let me know that you're hearing me. Okay, perfect. I see Peter, Joel, and Kevin are all hearing me, so I'm assuming everybody is. It looks like we have about 16 of us right now. I think we're expecting a few more than that. They may be popping in as we go. Um, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm sure you're all aware that Peter has organized for all of you the ability to attend some of these webinar sessions to learn. For those of you that are already using RAM, for those of you that are looking at RAM, thinking about getting it in your parishes, to learn a little bit more about it. We have different sessions planned to cover different topics. Um, and as I said, today's session is going to be more on the profiles, the people profiles, and making sure that each of you have customized RAM in the way that it's going to work best for you in your parishes for tracking the information on your people. Um, I will throw out to Peter as we go through this. If you have any thoughts, anything you would like to say along the way, I, I'm looking to see right now. I don't believe you're muted. So, Peter, if at any time you have some thoughts and want to share something, best practices or whatever, please feel free to jump in as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So, I have a Realm account open up that many of you hopefully will see is similar to yours. And we're going to work specifically this morning more in the administrative side of Realm. I'm on the community side, but I'm going to close that up. We're going to jump down into the admin area. And for our topic today, just basically making sure for each of you as a unique parish, but collectively, being that you're all an Episcopal parish, ideas on tracking the information in your realm account on your people in a way that meets all your needs, but at the same time, maybe doing it in a way that is unique to using Episcopal terminology, preparing for reporting on your parochial reports and things along those lines. So we're going to start again in the admin area. I am going down under system settings, and keep in mind, I'm assuming those of you that are in the training with me are admins or people that have rights to do these things we're about to look at. But if for some reason when you go back into your RAM account, if you can't get to where I am going, again, under admin and system settings and then general settings, it's a matter of making sure you are given the right security level to be able to get in and make these changes. Um, there is a question area. So as we go through the training in your webinar menu option, you should see an area to type in questions. Rebecca Music is with us today, and she's going to be monitoring those questions. And those that might be unique to one individual, she may respond back to you. Others that she feels would be beneficial to everyone to hear, we'll try to reserve a few minutes at the end of our time together to go back through those questions and see that we get them answered. If you enter questions and we do not get to them for lack of time, or we need a more thorough understanding of what you're asking, or it's going to be more involved in how we answer that, those would be responded to or will be responded to after our training time is over as well. So if you do have questions, be sure to pop them in there, and we'll either address them during the training time or they'll be addressed after the fact. We do have a recording of the questions and who asked them so we can get back in touch. Okay, so Peter and I have had a couple of conversations talking about, quote, best practices for to help, well, basically to help all of you make sure that we get your realm tracking set up so that as I said, it works for each of you independently, but also maybe helps you all together as Episcopal parishes. I'm in the area, in the general settings area now of the profile fields. Many of you may have converted from ACS or even another program that you were using prior to moving to Realm. And what you may see in your profile fields is just basically the fields that converted from your other system. If any of you were starting from not having a converted database, but starting your own database, you'll just basically see what RAM provided as the system fields plus any additional fields that you decided to add on your own. I thought I heard someone start to speak. Peter, were you about to say something?
No, no.
Okay.
No,
All right.
I'm sure there
It
was.
sounded
Yeah.
like somebody started to say something, and I didn't want to interrupt you. So we'll proceed then. So the idea with RAM on the back end, we're basically addressing what I call the back end side of RAM, the administrative side today, not so much the communication and the connectivity piece within your people, which will come in a later session. But in the back end side of RAM, where you're going to do your data tracking, we want to make sure that each of you know how to set up and have set up RAM to track the type of data you feel is useful in your parish. So in this area called profile fields, you will initially see we have enabled and we have disabled fields. Um, you may, I'm hearing somebody's phone ringing. We might need to mute some people while we're doing the training. If you have checked into that area, initially under the enabled fields, you'll see all of those that say system fields are the ones that come with RAM, and as we go below those, then you'll see additional fields. These could be fields that you converted from another system, or it could be fields that you've gone in manually and added. So what we're talking about here, when I say profile fields, is all the different information you want to track on the individual people that will be in your database. Now you'll notice here we have allergies and we have some links, Facebook linked and LinkedIn link. We have gender. We have giving numbers. You know, it may be that some people use giving numbers and others don't. If anyone doesn't use assigned giving numbers and that's not a field you need, you can certainly edit it and disable it along with any other field that you just don't use in your have a need to use in your office. You'll see the marital status, you'll see the member status. There's several of these we're going to go through and talk about. And I want to start by pointing out some fields we have in Realm that we've never really had before in using ACS. And I know even in some of the other software programs that other churches and parishes may have been using prior to Realm, there were some limitations on some of the fields. We have a new type of field in Realm, and I'm going to show it to you with the allergy field. And I'm going to edit this one. And what I want to point out is you have the ability to create a lot of different types of fields. And the new type of field, which the allergy field is one of those, is what we call a multi-list field. So previously you could have a list field, which meant you could select one item out of the list. But it didn't work very well for things like allergies because everybody's not allergic to just one thing. So we would typically just put allergies in a note area or something like that. But now you have what we call a multi-list field, which means you can add a variety of options into that field. In this case, different things that people might be allergic to. And then the individuals will have the ability to not select just one out of the list, but select multiples or as many as needed. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about the different types of data fields you might want to track on people. We do now have the multi-list, so they can select several options out of the same list. And then we have, link fields like we see here. We have the gender field. Again, that is a system field, and it is already populated to be able to track males and females. You'll notice on each of these fields, as I edit any of these, we have the option to enable it or disable it. Um, you can make certain fields required even as you are entering a new person into your database. So if you make a field required, you've got to be pretty confident you're going to have that information at the initial point of entry. Otherwise, you won't be able to add the person to your database. And I know the gender field is one that you may not know at the time of data entry based on a name. Sometimes you don't know if they were male or female. But just keep in mind if there's certain data fields that you absolutely require, we must at least have this minimum amount of information on an individual before they can go in our database. You can make those data fields required. And if you don't have that information, you won't be able to put the person in your database. Notice you also have an option on your profile field at the point of original data entry, at the point of adding that person to your database. Most of the time, we're lucky if we have a name, address, phone number, email, just some basic information about that individual. So you can eliminate at the point of the original data entry having to go through a lot of data fields that you basically don't even have the information on at that time. So you can enable just the fields you want to see at the point of the original data entry of that individual. Then once they get added to the database, then we could go back into their record as we retrieve the additional information from them and add that information at a later date. So you see the different data fields we have here. And like I say, you can turn them on, turn them off. We have the marital status, which is one of the fields that you just want to make sure is populated with the marital status is the way you want to track people. And you can remove any item or add any new value that you would like to see. You can even set a default if you would like to on certain data fields, so it will start out with an original default value, which of course could be changed if needed. Now, I want to spend some time talking about the member status. Um, and I've been a trainer with ACS for 23 years. I used ACS back in the DOS days. I started as a trainer when everything was moving from DOS to Windows. And I've been a trainer for ACS all these years as we're moving into realm. And every church or parish that I go to, we always have a discussion about member status because a lot of people will sometimes not quite understand what really should be here. I've seen churches that will have 15 or 20 or more member statuses, which is really not serving the purpose of the member status. I've seen some churches that they don't have enough member statuses because they just don't quite understand what it is and how it should be used. Now, the first thing I want to say about the member status field, and I've worked with many churches, that their thought is this is just identifying people that we consider to be members of our parish. But you're going to put a lot of people in your database that aren't, quote, members of your parish. So I define the member status field not so much as members of the parish or members of the church or members of the Episcopal denomination, so to speak. I define this as member of your database. So the values listed here in your member status field should basically serve a couple of purposes. number one, it should identify for you why they're in your database, what I call the front door relationship with that individual. And for you specifically, help you as you start preparing to complete and provide your parochial report information. So, as we talk about designing your member statuses, we want to use terminology that helps you pull the data for the parochial report. But keep in mind, this isn't just members of the parish, it is members of your database. So, you will have people in your database that may never set foot in the door, that may send money, that may have a relationship with you in a way through another member, even that they're not a member, may never become a member, not even a potential member, but there is a reason why you need that individual in your database. So we want to have a clear understanding when I pull up an individual and I look at their member status, that I understand what is the relationship with this parish, not that they're a member. Now, we do want to track members here as well. Peter connected with a few of your offices. I don't know which ones exactly, but he was filling some of you out for how you defined your member statuses and what worked for you, and reasons behind that. And he provided me with that information. And I'm also going to throw my own thoughts in here because, like I say, I've been training churches of all denominations for many, many years. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to throw out some ideas, and Peter and his staff are, I know, more than open and welcome to talking things through with you. I know that I think you guys even have your own little RAM support group where you can all connect with each other and talk with each other. I know Peter has said he is more than happy to connect with any of you on this after the session is over. So I'm just throwing ideas out now. And if you want to jot down the ones that sound interesting to you, but also, like I say, you can always get together and even just have kind of a group discussion among yourselves of what you think works best. But we do know that typically, now this is my demo site, so this is not to say this is what your member statuses will be. But what I'm going to throw out at you, and I'm going to kind of throw them in here as we talk, you might want one that you would identify those people that you consider to be your active members. Then you might want one, again, we're identifying them as a member, but they're not active. They're an inactive member. So a lot of, not just Episcopal, but a lot of churches of many, many different denominations I work with, we all have this big pool of members. And we know that they don't always, even though they're on the membership roll, they don't always show up, they don't always participate, they're not always involved. So a lot of people struggle with, when we're communicating with things going on around our church and our events, we know there's no point in sending a lot of information out to people that aren't interested, even though they're on the member roll. They haven't shown up in years or they haven't contributed. So a way to take all of your members and kind of divide them into two areas. We still count them all as members, but we can specifically pinpoint our active members and really push information to them. We can still track our inactive members, but maybe not pushing so much information to them because we know for whatever reason, they're not receptive or responding to that information. Now, I'm going to also suggest another option, and I'm just throwing them all up here so you can see them. Something along the lines of voting member or pledging member, or something like non-pledging member. So I'm just throwing out ideas on different options for how you might track your members. Then we might have something along the lines of uh, we need to track those that have been members. maybe have moved on to other parishes, or just contacted you and said, "Hey, we don't want to be on the membership roll anymore. We've joined a church of another denomination or something along those lines." But you still want to track historically the information about them as they were a member at one time. Now, I'm going to throw out a couple of other ideas. So sometimes you will have people that will come and participate and be as active as a member would be, but they have their own reason for choosing to never, quote, become a member. It could be from they're coming from another denomination or things along those lines. Um, so you might want to consider something, and I call it, if I could type, something like this. So they come regularly, they attend everything as faithfully and regularly as a member, but quote, they're not a member for their own personal reason. Then you might have, definitely, I think you will have, every church has people that will send money. You see, this one's already up here. People that will send money for memorials or honorariums or whatever. May never set foot in the door of your church. I mean, their only connection could be a member passed away that was a friend of theirs, and they send a memorial or whatever the case may be. Or are they wanting to support a disaster relief program you may have going on or something like that? So the contributor only would identify and tell you that the reason they're in your database is they had contributed something at some point in time, and that's all the expectation you have from them, that they're not going to show up on any given Sunday. Now, I'm going to add, we have one here. I'm looking for it again. Well, we have one here called Newcomer. Some of you may call it that. Some of you may call it, if I could, prospect or prospective member, if you want to add the member tag onto it. People that have expressed interest in possibly becoming a member of the church, but they're not there yet. You may want to track people that have visited, are not prospective members, but they visited because they're in town with family or friends, or passing through the area on a vacation or something. And I'm going to also add here, you will have people in your database, or I will say it this way, you will have a need to have people in your database um, in a situation where they're not a member, not ever considered to be a prospective member, but maybe they have a relationship to a member that, and maybe it's husband and wife, and one goes to your church and one goes to another denomination even, or another church. So because we want that member, when we send information to that member, we want them to know their spouse is included in anything that we do. You might have a need for something like um, just something as simple as non-member, or what you might call friend of the church, just to identify that there is a relationship between that person and your church. However, they're not a member, they're not a prospect, they're not even a quote contributor, whatever the case may be. Um, I've had some others I'm going to throw at you. I'm not going to put them on the screen. And I've compiled a list from what Peter sent me from several different churches. So we had active member, inactive member, either voting member or pledging member, non-pledging member, um, former member, regular attender, contributor only, prospect or prospective member, visitor, non-member. And then some others that were suggested were um, active other, quote, not baptized, um, communicant adult, communicant youth. Looking through my list here, and one more I want to bring to your attention is sometimes you will have people that will come with friends, typically senior adults, but sometimes kids and youth. You will have people that will come and participate in what you technically call your fun activities. They don't come to the regular services. They may go to other churches even. They're not prospects in any way, but they come and participate in events you may go and or their friend may go and participate at their church in events, just for the fellowship part of it. And you still want to have them in your database so you can send information to them regarding these upcoming events. That's what I call activity only or something along those lines. Um, Oops, sorry about that. Let me get that back down to regular size. Um, so the whole thought here is thinking of all of the different people who will be walking in your doors or communicating with your office or through your website or however they'll find you, and those individuals that you decided need to be in your database, but they're not members. But we still want to have an understanding through our member status of why are they in our database. Now, I've thrown these out as ideas, and some of these came from about, I don't know, Peter, I think maybe three or four different parishes that you've connected with, and they've given us their thoughts or their ideas. Um, and this is not to say this is all. You may come up with some others yourself that you feel would be beneficial. Um, what I'm going to say at this point is each of you individually and independently can come up with your own list of what you feel your member statuses should be that will work for you. But like I said, it wouldn't be a bad idea for all of you to maybe collectively be on the same page for reporting purposes with your parochial reports or any other reports you might be providing to the diocese or other individuals. Um, just common verbiage, common terms that work for all of you. And I'm going to say it again. If you'd like to maybe have some discussions among yourselves around this or with Peter, I know he has said that is definitely a possibility. So you could follow up with your own diocesan I can't speak this morning, realm group, or with the diocesan staff to even have a discussion on these. So I wanted to throw these ideas out because I've always said that I feel the member status field in any database is one of the most important fields because that tells you why that individual is in your database. And don't confuse it with, well, the only people that get a member status are people that are members. It's they're member of the database status, not member of the parish status. I'm going to point out some of the other profile fields we have here. We have the profile alerts. If any of you are familiar with those, that gives you the ability to attach a profile alert to any individual, which causes a little colored banner when you pull up their profile in RAM. Would be displayed diagonally across the top left-hand side of their picture, if there is a picture, or where the picture would go if there is not a picture. Um, where you decide what the different colors mean. So you have red, you have green, you have yellow. I'll just edit this so you can see. Well, actually, the colors don't show up here, but anyway, that you have about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 colors, the primary colors: red, green, blue, yellow, that you unique to you to your office. Can I say, okay, well, red means this, purple means this, green means this. So when we see that pop up on an individual's record, it tells you, the staff, to be aware of the situation based on what the color means. So you might find that to be very useful. I was working in a church yesterday where they had a conversation about using the color coding in their church and how the different colors would mean different things, and it's unique to them and their staff to understand those. Just basically an alert, like it says. Of course, we have
Pam,
built.
I just want to interject. I'm being asked if participants would mute their microphones or phones unless you need to ask a question. We're hearing some coughing in the background, and I understand that, but it makes it a little hard to hear Pam. So if you
Great,
could do
thank you.
that, those attending, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So as I was saying, you have fields for things like suffixes, your junior, senior, the third, as you might attach those to some of the men in your parish. You have titles, Mr., Mrs., Reverend, again, titles unique to the Episcopal denomination, um, specifically, Reverend, the very right Reverend, Bishop, just whatever you need. Here, it's your database for you to add whatever values need be in here specific to your church. And bear with me, I'm waiting for the screen to load. I don't know what's going on here. Let me click on it, see if it'll reload. Um, that is it. There we go. All right. So we have, as you see, a Twitter link. Now, we do have the ability to track dates. And I want to say, please understand, unlike those of you that may have used ACS in the past, you had specifically, besides the birth date and the date that they joined, you had 6 date fields. And if you used all 6, you were done. In Realm, you're not limited to 6. If you want to add a new profile field to be a date field, when you go to add the field, you just title it whatever the date purpose of the date is, and you choose the fact that it's going to be a date field. So in ACS specifically, you had 6 date fields, you had 12 of what we called list fields, and then you had 4 fields that you could type data into that were all, quote, user definable fields. RAM is totally different. You can create as many text fields or date fields, list fields as you have a need for. Now, there's a maximum number of these out there in the world of RAM, but I have yet to work with a church that has maxed out the limit of fields that were needed. Notice you have the text field, the date field. Now we have a number field where it is truly designed to hold a number. We have a yes no field, which is more of a checkbox type of a field. The traditional list field, individual, and as I pointed out earlier, the multi-list field, which I think is really beneficial and something that's been much needed. So you get to create whatever field you want, and you're not limited to, like I was saying earlier, 6 date fields, 4 fields, and 12 list fields as we were in ACS. So that's to your advantage to create whatever fields you need. Now, I'm going to mention also um, all these other fields that you see here are user defined for each of you create your own fields. Like I said, you may see some of these from a previous conversion. And every time I go in after a conversion, one of the things we talk about is some of the fields that gets converted, they realize, we don't really use that. We haven't used that in years. Didn't even realize it was still in our database. So if you see fields listed in your database that you just don't even use or need anymore, you now have the ability to go in here and either choose to delete or disable that field, so you're no longer having to look at a field every day when you're working in your database that you don't even use anymore. I'll mention also with some of these fields that you can identify which fields you allow your church goers to view, to see themselves, and even which fields you allow them to edit or update or make changes to on their record or record of their family members. So again, this is new to RAM, allowing you to choose what fields they can see and what fields they can edit. I want to point out, I'm going to just talk about, you see some fields listed here, but back to just thoughts about the types of fields that would be most useful to all of you. In addition to the member status field, I think having a field to definitely identify the date they joined, so you've got that part of the record tracking, but possibly a field to identify how they became a member. And you get to populate the how with the verbiage that matches how people can become a member of your Episcopal parishes. And again, that could be something that could be made common to all of you that would be useful data to be able to be pulled into your parochial report. So as you see here, anything that you don't need, you can delete. and then you can add whatever values you want in here to identify for you specifically for pulling reports how people have become members at your parish. So the date and the how. Now, some other thoughts of other useful profile fields. One that was mentioned was where the individual is coming from. So you could have a field where you could have text a text field that could be typed into if you wanted to be very unique and specific with where they came from, or maybe it's more of a list type of field that they came from another Episcopal parish, or they came from another denomination, or they were unchurched altogether. So there's a couple of ways you could track that, just depending on how much detail tracking you might want to do. My suggestion would be to have a profile field that basically would say they came from another Episcopal parish, they came from another denomination. You could even list the denominations if you wanted to be that specific: Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, or whatever. Um, I would probably recommend using the note area if I wanted to list a name of a specific parish or church that they were coming from as they became more connected with you, where you could put in the note much more detail about the name of the church, the city, the location of the church, or any other information. So that was one of the ones that was mentioned in the email that I received from Peter. Some suggestions from some of you that participated in those conversations. Um, One that's quite common across all of the denominations is when we're talking about children, youth, kids that are in school, a way of always being able to know what grade they're in. And what I have found over the years to be the most efficient way to track that is to not have a field here that we would call school grade attending, but have a field we would call expected year of graduation or graduation year. And instead of having to go in here every year and change them from being in the first grade to the second grade and second grade to the third grade, and somebody has to do that every year, when you enter them in and put their expected year of graduation, and it's hard to believe now we're in the 2020s and 2030s with some of these young kids. Once you populate the field, you really don't have to touch it again unless for some reason their expected year of graduation changes. But you can always back down from that expected year of graduation to know what grade that child is in this year. For the youth people, your people that work in your youth ministry, to have that information by entering data one time and not having to touch that data field every year. So that's been something I've suggested for years, and I'm glad to see some of you are doing that as well. I wanted to also mention a recommendation of a profile field was why people interacted with your church. So it could be a drop down. Some ideas that were listed were things like they interacted because they were an out of town visitor. They were there attending a special occasion like a wedding or baptism. They needed emotional or spiritual support, or they were returning to the church from having been away, physically moving out of the area, or just maybe attending another and deciding to come back to yours. So that's potentially a data field you can create to track if you're interested in tracking that type of historical data on why people connected with you. And then another one was how they found your church, how they found out about you. I have a lot of churches that like to track that data because it helps you to, when you're looking at spending the money and the resources you have to get your church's name out there and get your church out into the community, it helps you to know the best way to go with the money that you have so that you put it on the best resources for connecting out into the community. Some ideas on how they found the church, things like they did an internet search, they saw the parish website, they saw a social media page regarding your church, word of mouth. So direct mail. I don't know if you do anything like that, or possibly just another option on how they might have found your church. Everything we're talking about here is very easily searched through to queries in RAM. If you wanted to, if bottom line is, we want to know, well, how many people found us through an internet search versus a parish website versus a direct mail. So again, what's the best way to spend our resources that we do have? So this data is very easily collected into the query area for you to analyze it and decide the best way for you to push your church's information out publicly. The one we talked about as far as why they interacted with the church, if they came looking for some emotional support, or they came for a special occasion, or they were an out of town visitor. This gives you so much potential statistical data for you to have to pull to work with to make decisions as you move forward with the direction you want to go with your church and the activities you have going on and the ministries you have going on. Okay, look, checking our time to make sure we're not running out of time. So each of these, and I'm just going to, as an example, I'm just going to add another profile field here to show you basically how I would do it. And I'm just going to call it how they found us. And I'm going to create this as a list field. And I want it to display for, you can have it display for individual people or for families, not just the individuals in the family, but the family as a whole. You can have certain fields display only for adults, not children. So you just decide who you want the field to display for. But then the options could be something like this. And I never promised I was a good typist. All right. There we go. It's just being a little bit slow. So that's all there is. Once you decide what fields of data will help us as the staff, as the clergy of a particular church, or even all of you collectively within your denomination, what data fields will help us be able to track the information we would like to track for our own purposes within the parish, for reporting purposes on the parochial report, for all of us together collectively within the Episcopal Diocese of Washington to kind of pool our resources together, how we can be most effective within our communities and do what we're supposed to be doing, the reason we exist, which is reaching out and ministering to the people around you. Um, Now, this is in the area of profile fields. I want to mention a couple of other things this morning before I said this morning, this afternoon, before we run out of time. Also, in the same area as the general settings where you find your profile field, you also have the ability to track all the individual people within a specific family by identifying the primary family members, the children, and the other people in the family. So within a family, you can have primary positions, child positions, and other positions. So, what is the makeup of the family? Now, traditionally, you had the ability to have two, what we called primary family members, and they were called primary one, primary two, head, spouse, whatever you called them. There were two of them, and that had to work for every family and every makeup of every family that was in your database. With Realm, you have the ability to have up to four, only two per family, but up to four primary positions within a family. So you might have some families that you call them primary one, primary two. You might have another family you call them head and spouse or primary, secondary, or whatever. But you have the ability to have up to five now and select the two that are appropriate to that family. Um, that's great. I don't think that's a super big deal, but what I think is a super big deal is we have the ability in the area of children to have up to 5 options. It used to be in ACS and other databases I'm familiar with that when you had a family, you had the primaries, the primary one, the primary two, and then you had child, 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 depending on how many children were attached to the family. The problem with that was that sometimes it wasn't the mom and the dad bringing the child, it was a grandparent or it was a neighbor or it was a relative, where if you attach the child to them as a child, for all intents and purposes, it appeared as if it were their child, where in a lot of cases it wasn't. So now we could literally have options where I could connect if I were taking my grandchildren to church with me. They could be connected to me but identified as a grandchild. You might have neighbor child, um, relative child, or you now can have up to 5 of these. And in my personal opinion, having the ability to identify more specific that true child's relationship to the person it's attached to in the database is huge, especially where you have neighbors bringing friends, kids in the neighborhood with their children. And then the same thing down with the other position. And I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of reasons that I use other within a family, unless you have a family where you have someone who is the child of the 2 primary records, but they're an adult in and of their own right. But for particular reasons, they won't ever be set up as head of their own family or spouse of somebody else. Sometimes we have people with some physical or mental or emotional situations that they'll be taken care of by their parents, um, although they're still an adult. So we don't really want to identify them in the area of being a child, so that when we pull searches on the child positions, we're truly getting children, but they're still not out on their own, head of their own family. So they can be connected to their parents by being identified here as an adult child, could be one of the options for what we might call an other position. Or anyone else. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scroll the screen. If you have people that you consider part of this family, but they don't fit the parameters of being the primary or the child within the family. And just like with the others, you can have up to 5 of these as well. And in my opinion, the ability to handle the children in this way, although the other 2 are great, that's the one that really is beneficial to helping you better track your people in your database. Um, Also wanted to mention, while we're talking about profile fields, I'm going to jump over to the last option over here on the right. It's called sacraments. We traditionally want to track information about our people pertaining to the membership of the church, pertaining to any um, baptisms or special events that have happened in the life of that individual in relationship to the church. I used to recommend you would have a date field called date baptized or date confirmed or date this or date that. Um, but within Realm, because we know how important it is to track this information, and sometimes you need to track more than just a date that it happened, we now have a special area that is called sacraments. Now, you don't have to continue to call it sacraments. I work with a lot of churches that they change the verbiage from sacraments to milestones or something equivalent to what meets the verbiage they prefer to use. But it will be called sacraments unless you choose to change it. If you turn this area on, if you haven't been to it yet in your Realm database, when you first go to sacraments, you have to determine that you want to use it, and you have to choose one of 2 paths. You'll choose either the Catholic path or the Protestant path. Depending on which path you choose, determines how the sacraments get set up for you to track. So we're looking here at the sacraments that are enabled at this point. So you notice we have baptism, communion, confirmation, marriage, ordination. anointing of the sick. Now, when you first turn your zone, you may see some of these. I think a couple of these are going to come in as disabled. So if you want to use those two, you'll have to make sure you enable them. And I know one of those is the anointing of the sick, and I think the other is the ordination, if I'm not mistaken. So a couple of these will be hidden over here in the disabled area. If you want to use them, you just enable them, or if you have one you don't want to use, you just disable them. Now you notice there's an edit option for each one of these. And as I said earlier, sometimes it's more, I want to go to the baptism one specifically. Sometimes it's more than just date baptized that you want to track. So if you use this new special area that's been created just for this purpose in realm, you get to select what information, when you go in to enter a date baptized in addition to the date, what other information you want the system to prompt you to provide by giving you a box or a place to put it into, a text field, so to speak. So you notice you can turn on or off any of these pertaining to the event, in this case, baptism, ordination, confirmation, whatever it is. You get to specifically decide how much detailed information you want to track. And once you have done that, and then again, once you've turned this area on, if you want to leave it as sacraments or milestones or whatever you want to call it, then you're going to save all of that. And what you're going to find at that point is attached to all the people in your database. And I'm going to pull up Jim Abrams here. There will be now an area on every person's profile to enter that information as it is occurring. So we're going to start over here with Jim. We're going to go to the edit option here, back to what we were just discussing under his personal information. See, this is where we will see all those profile fields that we were discussing earlier. Date of birth, gender, marital status, allergies, and you'll notice here, allergies, it's a multi-list option that you can choose as many as needed. The family positions based on how you've defined those. And the one we spent a good bit of time talking about, the attendee, I mean, not attendee, the member status, and selecting those. And here's where you'll see those profile alert colors that you are able to choose from that would cause that banner to display. And I'm going to show you this in just a second. And any of those other user definable profile fields that you have identified you would like to track, I'm always all over having a reason field for identifying why they became a former member or a deactivated member, because we're tracking them when they come in, how they joined, and when they joined. So when they're no longer a member, for historical purposes, we want to track, and I had suggested a member status of former member and then a reason why they became a former member. And you will create your own list of those reasons. So I'm always recommending that as a field to be in every church's database. A faith background, like I was saying, something along those lines, how they found us, how they joined, and possibly the expected year of graduation, t-shirt size for, again, the people that will be participating in activities that we need to always know what t-shirt size to provide for them, possibly. So all of these are those profile fields that we were discussing earlier this morning. Now, in addition to that, see, here's the colored profile alert I was talking about. So we have their personal information. Then I mentioned that in some situations, you might want to tag a note along with, when they came to your church, I want to add a note, the name of the church they came from. Or if they leave your church, I want to add a note, the church they went to. or any other personal information that just doesn't fit in a little text box somewhere. And then you'll also see over here now are the sacraments. So you notice now I can go through each of these and I can enter the data as it pertains to these based on the fields you've indicated you want to be populated based on the sacrament or the milestone. And I apologize for the spinning wheel. Of course, while I'm trying to do a training session, my internet's going to slow down. So anyway, sacrament notes, profile fields. Here we go. So I can enter the data that you've decided is applicable. And notice I can add a note pertaining specifically to a baptism in this case. Okay, I know our time is almost up. I'm going to quickly jump over to Rebecca and see if there were any questions that we wanted to address with everybody before our time is totally gone.
Yes, thank you. We do have a couple of questions that I think are very beneficial to everyone. So I'm going to switch sharing back to my screen. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. One of the questions, as Pam was going through and talking about the profile fields that you have set up, and maybe there are some list items in a profile field that you no longer need, or maybe you would want to combine a couple of them into one. I think you can see on my screen here, what I've done is gone to reporting, reports, and custom query, and I'm going to search on member status. So what you would do is search on, for instance, if it's member status, search on that particular status that you no longer want to use. And I'm going to choose show results. And hopefully I will get some individuals here. And then once you have your list, you can leave everyone checked, or if you scroll down through and you say, nope, I want to uncheck someone. But if you're wanting to basically combine or change the member status that someone has to a different member status, then you do the query. And then here you do have to be an admin in your realm data set. And when you click the drop down, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is the option that says change profile field. And when you change that profile field, it tells you 348 profiles will be affected. Member status is the field. And then I'm going to choose what I want it to be changed to. And once I do that, so before they're an attendee, afterwards they're going to be communicant. You click on make the change, and it will do a mass change for everyone that had the member status of attendee. They will then be changed to communicant. Then you could go back to the system settings and delete attendee because you no longer need it. Those, I think we had like 3 people asking that question. So this is a quick and easy way that you can do a mass change of profile data and get that changed so that you can see that information. Another question we had was about disabling profile fields. So if you disable a profile field, can you still go and search on that data? No, you can't. Now, you can disable a profile field, and it actually leaves that data on the individual's records, but I wouldn't suggest doing that because then what if somebody goes and enable it and all of a sudden you have incorrect data depending on the type of field it was. So the best thing to do would be if you're cleaning up data, which we understand you want to do, especially if you move from ACS or another system, and now you're kind of wanting to consolidate your data and make sure that it makes sense in what you're using, you can use the change profile field information to move the data around, and then you can disable that field, clearing it off of the individual's records. We had another question. Let me just kind of drag this down a little bit here. Where are my questions? So hopefully that answers the questions about mass changing, disabling them. Let's see what else we have here. Yep, took care of that one. All right, we had a question about the system group. Yes, the system group, everyone that is added into your Realm database is automatically in the Realm system group, automatically. So now we do have people that are doing some different things depending on how you think or are planning to use the system group. So we will have to, we can work through that with you individually because that's more of an individual kind of thing. Um, is there a way to see other relationships in Realm, especially if you previously used ACS? We had that other relationships option there. Um, we do not have that exact ability in Realm today. We do have the ability for you to associate a child with more than one family without having to add them multiple times. So the child would really only have one profile. They would be in a primary family, and they can be in multiple secondary families. And when you do a search on that child, and then you would need to contact the parents, it can contact all of the parents. So we do have that is handled, but we don't have other relationships. That is on our 2020 roadmap to add that ability. So you would be able to link people that are in different families and be able to see the relationships of those different families within your data set. Let me see if there's anything else here to clarify. Yep, took care of that one. Took care of that one. I believe we took care of that one. I'm just kind of going through these questions here. Other relationships. Yep, answered that. So the only other one that we have, well, there's a couple. One, I do have a question about baptism. So to answer your questions about baptism, the question is there a way to put in the names of two mothers or two fathers? And the way to do that is actually when you're editing the sacraments, there is an area where you can either select a profile that's already in your database or type in a name. You would have to manually type in the two names if there are two mothers and two fathers that need to be on that certificate. There's not a way to select multiple profiles and it automatically pull in that name, but you can just type them in, the two names there. The other thing I wanted to quickly cover, which I think will be helpful to you guys, especially today, maybe just managing the profiles and stuff, is how to send out an invite for Realm. I'm just going to do it like from one person, but you can also do it from a query. So if you do a query on a group of people and you want to invite all of them, when you click the drop down, you see there is an option here to send a Realm invite. And what it would do is when I choose this, it tells me individuals without an account will send an invitation to join Realm. So it automatically knows if someone already has an account, meaning they've already created a login and logged into Realm. So it's not going to send them another invite because they've already been invited. So you can send them in mass from the custom query. As you set up your groups and your group leaders can send invites to their group, which would also be an invite to Realm if they don't have a login, and they would be able to create their login and get in. Or I can send it from an individual profile. So you see here we have Jim. Now Jim already has a login. But if we chose someone who did not have a login, let's see if this is one. Once we load their profile here at the top, yep, she doesn't have a login. So when you click the More Options menu button here, you have the option to send a Realm invite, and that will send them an invite for this person to join Realm. You can customize your Realm invite to have the wording that you would want to have for your parish by going, again, as long as you have the admin rights, to go to System Settings and then System Emails. Scroll down a little bit and you'll see under the Individual section is the Realm invite. And this is where you can edit and add whatever wording you want. The link is a hyperlink field that's inserted there, so you don't have to worry about changing that, and you'll want to include that. So when they click on it, they will be accepting the invite to your Realm site. So that's a way for you to start inviting people. I know some of you may have some questions about, well, what's some best practices and best ways that we can uh, start inviting people and getting them to understand why we want them to do that, and what is why it's important to your parish for them to join. And that's some things that we can cover. I don't want to go too far over. I can give you quick examples. One, of course, is they would be able to see their giving history. Those of you that are signed up for Realm Online Giving with Vanco, an individual, when they log in, would be able to set up a recurring gift and also to give a one-time gift. So they can do both of those without you having to do anything for them. There is the ability for admins to be able to set up recurring gifts for individuals. That's something that we'll cover more when we're talking about the stewardship campaign and how all that works with pledging and setting up gifts and things. Another one that many churches have been successful is um, and getting people to sign up and see the value of them doing that is because they can go in and update their profile information, their address, their email address, their phone number, making sure their family members are correct. If they just had a new baby, they could go in and add that new individual, that new baby in there. That's one way that people have seen the importance of creating their account and logging into Realm. Because when you expand that and you say, with our different ministries, we want to be able to reach out to you, make sure that we have the correct contact information. That's one way to get them. Another way was to get people to update their photos. A lot of people like to have their updated photos. I personally don't like taking pictures or having my picture anywhere, but that's another successful way. And we'll share some other ideas with Peter and all of you on different ways that churches and parishes have been successful in getting people to accept their invites and log in and set up an account. It's all about building what is important to your parish and why it's important, and then they get it. If you just say, oh, we're just going to send an invite, accept your invite and log in, but helping them understand, which is why you can do editing the invite, you can include some of that information in there. So when they get the email, they understand why this is important, and that helps them go ahead and choose that link there. So I wanted to make sure that we covered that today as well, as part of, just managing profiles and inviting people and getting started on that part. I don't see any other questions here. So I think, unless we have any other questions that come in, and of course, Peter will be following up with you guys to get your feedback and anything else that we need, any further questions you have on this. But I think that's it, Pam. If you want to close out, I think we're good.
All right, sounds great. I appreciate your help with this, Rebecca. And always your input is very much appreciated. So I hope everyone has hopefully gleaned some information from the web session that we've done today. And I do encourage you to all possibly think together, talk together, communicate together on best practices for setting up your individual parish databases, but at the same time, having information across all of your parishes, is useful to all of you individually, but it's also useful for all of you in the diocese to be communicating in the same way. So thank you all for your participation. I know you have a schedule. We have some more of these sessions planned out with the topics. Peter has provided that for all of you. And so we will be getting back together I think it's a couple of weeks. So I'll have to look on my schedule to talk about another topic. I hope you'll all join us. And in the meantime, I know Peter has said he's more than willing to have you guys, connect with him and pursue any additional conversations you'd like to have. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll look forward to being with all of you at our next session. Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.